Welcome to Windy Night Stories. Tonight's story is by Withew Fenn. The Hand on the Latch. What is this coin upon my watch chain? It is a Spanish doubloon, a very pretty piece of money. On one side is the head of Philip IV, with the date 1640. On the reverse, two upright pillars, the Pillars of Hercules, with the setting sun between them, and the motto, Ni plus ultra, beneath. How did I come by it? Curiously enough. It was the old story, repeated, as it seemed to me, ad nauseum. An old house, haunted of course, in which no stranger could pass a night, or if he did, something awful happened. He would be found in the morning dead, mad, or speechless, unable to tell of what he had seen, and refusing to be questioned. I did not know at first what the tradition was, or what was supposed to occur in this particular instance. I paid little attention to the gossip. I only know that the house was pointed out to me as haunted, and I derided the notion. Where was it? Well, it was situated in a rather unlikely spot for such a terror to take root in, viz. The outskirts of an ordinary market square in a country town not far from the sea, a region devoted twice a week to the sale of fat oxen, sheep, pigs, and poultry. And the town? Its name does not matter. I consent, remember, to tell the story only on condition that no questions are asked. I am not going to be cross-examined, and I decline to reveal real names. But it might have been anywhere. Any half-dozen localities down the eastern counties line would answer to it. So utterly commonplace and uninteresting was its whole aspect. Yet the house itself was quaint, being red-bricked, low-roofed, and narrow-windowed, and had been built at least 150 years ago. Though modern structures now hemmed it in, and towered high above it on either side, it must originally have stood by itself, within its own garden, which still ran a long way to the rear. It does not matter at all, either, what took me to the town. I had to live there, that is enough, and I lodged for years with some respectable people who, at the end of that time, emigrated, and I had to find fresh quarters. Apartments were to let that would suit me, I was told, in the identical house, if I did not mind the tradition about it. Mind the tradition? Not I, indeed. I did not really know what it was. My brain was as entirely devoid of superstition as any mortal's could be. I had seen a good deal of what is called spiritualism, which was in those days a novelty in England. I had seen the tables turned and heavy furniture moved without any visible agency. But this experience had only served to confirm my original opinion that everything of the kind was due to a clever jugglery and imposture. Ghosts, of course, I had no belief in. So I took the apartments, a large bedroom and a small sitting room, that were to let in the house. It was occupied by a foreman of some tan works and his wife. He had got the short remainder of the lease on very low terms, because the house had been for years untenanted on account of its evil reputation. The old story again. Mr. Tanner had been in it only a few months when I took the rooms, and we both laughed at the haunted notion when we spoke of it, for he was as great a skeptic as myself. Seen anything? Heard anything? Not he. If there be a ghost, said the honest fellow, he will not go for to trouble himself with the likes of us, nor with you, sir, neither, I'll be bound. And I agreed with him. Weeks and weeks went by, only to confirm our views. Nothing whatever happened, of course, and in fact the thing passed out of my memory after the first few days. I grew to be quite at home in my new quarters, and was thoroughly comfortable. The bedroom was the sort of apartment which modern phraseology describes as particularly jolly. Being at the back of the house, and on the first floor, it overlooked a long strip of old-fashioned garden, which, as the autumn came on, was redolent with sweet perfumes. The brightness and cheerfulness of the chamber which delighted me were mainly due to a piece of vandalism committed by some previous tenant. The paneling, which ran round to the height of about 4 feet, had been painted a creamy white. Door and window sashes had shared the same fate, and a wallpaper, similar in tone, gave a light and airy aspect to the room which otherwise might have proved dark and gloomy. I am a great person for light. I always burn a night light, so my surroundings suited me exactly, kept scrupulously clean as the proverbial new pin, a meal might have been eaten off any part of the apartment, or off its simple dimity-covered and curtained furniture. In a word, it would have been hard to find any place more unlike a haunted chamber. The two windows were to the right of the bed, the door to the left. A little beyond the foot, and directly opposite the bed, the fireplace. On the 23rd of October, 1811, I went to bed, as usual, about 11 o'clock. As I have said, I always burn a nightlight, and, more from habit than for any other reason, I always bolt my door. Never a good sleeper, the slightest sound awakes me, and I woke on this night suddenly, about an hour and a half, I suppose, after I went to bed. Some noise had disturbed me, I was sure of that, as I became conscious. What was it? At that time of night the whole neighborhood was as silent as the grave, and the elements on this occasion were equally so. The sound was in the room, no, not actually in the room, but just outside, at the door, and was made by somebody trying to open it. Yes, undoubtedly. I could hear it creak as it yielded slightly to the pressure of a shoulder from the outer side, and as, sitting upright in bed, I kept my eyes eagerly upon it, I saw the heavy, black, old-fashioned iron latch, conspicuous on the white door, rise. A hand was on it. Presently it was allowed to fall softly. Presently it was slowly and as softly raised again, and the shoulder again pressed steadily against the door. But the bolt below the latch was firm, and when the attempt to enter had been repeated 3 or 4 times, it was given up entirely. Should I call out? Should I look out? No, my curiosity was checked by my prudence, perhaps by a slight qualm also. I remained for a long while listening intently, but I could hear no one outside. No movement, no footstep, no creaking of the floor or stair. After watching and waiting for a long while, I got cautiously out of bed, slid back the bolt noiselessly, suddenly threw open the door, and looked into the passage, for I had still heard no retreating footstep outside. Although the bright light from my room streamed into the passage as far as the head of the old staircase, nobody was to be seen. I was too late. I had waited too long, or perhaps, while I was getting out of bed, the rustle of the clothes had prevented my hearing the would-be intruder retire. Listening, and peering over the stair rail down into the darkness, I could still discover no sign of life, except for the heavy breathing of the sleeping landlord and his wife. They slept on the ground floor, and beyond their 2 rooms, my 2 and the kitchen, the remainder were unfurnished, for we were the sole inmates of the house. Silence reigned everywhere, and in the course of half an hour I was back in bed, with the door bolted and the light burning brightly, as if nothing had occurred. But you may guess I did not sleep much, though, except for my thoughts. I was disturbed no more for the night. I had looked at my watch before returning to bed, and calculated that the whole affair had happened between 12 and 1. And now, what did it mean? I will not bother you with my speculations on the point, for they simply landed me nowhere. I was puzzled. I never for one moment doubted my landlord's honesty, nor, on the other hand, my own senses. Someone had tried to get into my room, that was certain. Who was it? I determined to keep my own counsel, at any rate until I should see if the attempt were renewed. Before retiring the next night, I was careful to take a look at the fastenings of the front and back doors. They were both secure, the latter, which led into the garden, however, appearing the least so. One heavy bolt only held it, but it was shot. Mr. and Mrs. Tanner kept earlier hours than I did, and I could hear they were soundly sleeping when I went to my room. Uncomfortable? Yes, of course I felt a little uncomfortable. Most people would, however amply endowed with moral courage, but, honestly, it was curiosity that principally possessed me. However, I bolted my door, lit the light, and went to bed as usual. For an hour or more I lay broad awake, with eyes fixed on the black latch. But about 11:45, after looking at my watch, I began to feel drowsy, and, though fully intending not to sleep, I dropped off, I suppose, in another minute or 2, for I was awakened suddenly by a reoccurrence of precisely the same sounds as those which had disturbed me on the previous night. There was a slight creaking of the door from the pressure as before. There was the hand on the latch outside, causing it to rise and fall as before. There was an interval, then a renewal of the effort to enter, then another interval, and so on for some 20 minutes. After that, all was quiet again. What should I do? Irresolute, and not without some misgivings, at last I slipped out of bed and took a peek into the passage. But still there was nobody there. Whoever had been there was not there now, and he or she must have got out of the way in the most mysterious manner, for I had never yet detected any indication of a footfall. The third night came. I still rigidly determined on keeping my own counsel until I had got to the bottom of this queer experience. I resented the idea of being twitted with the cant and rubbish about the haunted house, as I knew I should be if I ever uttered a word concerning what had occurred. Yet I confess I was perplexed. The notion of robbery was hardly feasible. In the first place, I had nothing worth stealing. A free access to my rooms could be had all day. Well, as I say, the third night came, and with it an exact repetition, at the same hour, of all that had taken place twice before. Except that, as the latch rose for the second time, I called out in a low but clear voice before leaving my bed, "Wait a moment, and I will let you in." The latch fell on the instant with a sharp click. "Ha-ha," I thought, "we are getting at it." But before I could gain the door and open it, the mysterious personage was gone. He was again too quick for me, and once more all was quiet for the remainder of the night. The following morning I made a minute examination of the passage, room, latch, door, floor, ceiling, above, below, and in every corner. There were plenty of opportunities for doing this, as Tanner and his wife were often away from home for hours together, but it led to no result. I could find no clue to the mystery. For the 2 following nights nothing whatever occurred. Evidently my examination had been observed, and I was guessed to be on the alert. But on the 6th night, exactly as before, the whole business took place over again. This was getting tiresome, what with the uneasiness of mind it caused and the watching and waiting. I had had little or no sleep for nearly a week. There was only one way for it, therefore, open to me now. I must leave my door unbolted and see what would happen. I thought it well to be prepared for emergencies, so when I went to bed on the 7th night, which was the 29th of October, I did not undress, but merely lay down quietly under the counterpane, with a good thick stick alongside of me. It was soon after 12 that the strange and unpleasant performance always seemed to commence, and true to the custom, here it is beginning again. Here is the latch slowly and softly rising. I grasp my stick and prepare to spring upon the intruder. The door yields now to the pressure, of course, and is gradually and stealthily opened by no one. Yet there it is, clearly wide open before my eyes. No mistake about that. I am sitting upright on the bed, regarding it with astonishment. And now I am aware, for the first time, that I am not alone in the room. A sensation perfectly independent of sight or hearing overtakes me and assures me of this. But the door is closing again under the pressure of the unseen hand, and there is the latch rising as if lifted over the catch by cautious fingers so that it shall make no noise. While I am gazing at it with intense wonder, and after a minute has elapsed, I am startled by the sound of a gentle though smart click, as of a spring which has been pressed. It comes from the direction of the fireplace opposite the foot of the bed, and there, as I look, I see that one of the panels by the side of the white heavy wooden mantelpiece has sprang open, showing a deep, dark cavity within. I remain perfectly still, my whole being in my eyes. Presently, from the depths of the recess, there emerges an iron-clamped box, about 1.5 feet square. It seems that it is being drawn out by a human hand, only the hand is not visible, and now it is lifted by the same mysterious agency a little way into the room, and is then set gently down on the floor. While my attention is engaged on the box, my eyes are again directed towards the panel, which has now been shut with the same click of the spring which had opened it. Otherwise there is no sound, no footstep, no rustling garment. The box being well in the light, I can see that it is very antique. The clamps and bosses are elaborately ornamental and lead up to a central pattern on the top, where evidently is the lock. Over this is a strong iron handle, and while taking in these details, I see this sort of treasure chest lifted and carried, as it might be by a powerful hand, towards the door, which, after a moment's notice, is opened. Then the chest disappears, the door is gently closed, and I feel that I am alone. Here is spiritualism indeed with a vengeance, but I swear I will never discover the jugglery, if jugglery it really be, yet. For what I propose the trick should be practiced upon me, I am at a loss to imagine. I have somehow got to believe that if I would see it out, I must make no noise, so, treading with the utmost caution, I follow the chest into the passage, just in time to catch sight of it vanishing into the darkness of the staircase from the bright light shining out from the room. For a sane man, with all his senses about him, to believe his eyes under these circumstances was difficult, but you shall hear by and by what confirmation I can give of the facts. At the head of the stairs I pause and listen. The bolt of the back door is drawn, and I see a glimmer of the moonlight steal into the lower region as the door opens. When it is shut again, I creep downstairs, reopen it, and pass into the garden, looking radiant in its mantle of dew, which glistens like silver in the full moonlight of the tranquil autumn night. And there, sure enough, I behold the box moving away along the serpentine path, which I am aware ends in a dense tangle of a neglected thicket. Noiselessly I follow on the soft turf. With great difficulty I keep it in sight as it is carried in and out among the bushes until it reaches the furthermost corner of the old wall-protected domain, but the strong moonlight aids me. The box is set on the ground. There is a rustling of the dense undergrowth beneath some gnarled and twisted apple trees thereabouts. The tangled herbage is gently moved aside as if by feet and hands, and then I see the planking of a trapdoor. Soon this is raised with difficulty and crushed back lightly upon the bushes. I cannot approach very near, for I am conscious of a slight return of the same sensation of not being alone, which I had experienced in my room, but I can see plainly what is going on. The chest is taken up again and poised for an instant over the pit or well which the trapdoor has revealed. Then it is lowered, as it might be, by a rope or a chain, but this is no more visible than are the hands or the person of him who appears to be letting it down into the well. For well it is, I can divine from the plash and gurgle which echo when the water is reached. A minute or two elapse, then the trapdoor is shut down again. The bushes and undergrowth move and sway a little as they swing back over it into their place, and not a sound breaks the stillness of the night. No footfall or rustling of the autumn leaves, no motion, no sign of life amongst the shrubs as anyone leaving the spot. But I am conscious of becoming once again the sole occupant of the garden, and stand gazing up at the glorious full moon, literally moonstruck for a while, and more bewildered than I have ever been before in my life. Of course I question myself as to whether I am awake or in my right mind. And, of course, in the end, I go back to my room by the way I came, bolting the back door after me. Of course I examine carefully the region of the mantelpiece. Of course I can discover no spring whereby to open the panel, for it was evidently a secret one, and as I did not see the hand which touched it, I cannot tell where it is situated. But I can discover the position of the recess by the hollow sound which at length answers the rap from my knuckles, which I give each panel in succession. There is a cavity beyond this one without doubt, and its position corresponds with the place where the opening appeared. So far, then, at least, here is confirmation. In the morning I will endeavor to get some more. I will search beneath the undergrowth at the end of the garden, and see if the trapdoor and well really have any existence. Then, after a lengthened debate with my reason, I turned in, and oddly enough sleep soundly for the remainder of the night. Daylight creates more doubt and perplexity of mind than did the moonlight mystery itself. Have I been dreaming after all? Surely there can be no other solution. If so, then have I been in a dream for 7 days and nights? Still, there is a hollow behind that panel, of which I had no idea before, that is a fact, though I cannot as yet find a way to open it. What about the trapdoor in the garden? As soon as the coast is clear, this will have to be investigated. I'm not going to be such a fool as to let the laugh be turned against me by saying a word until I am in a position of more certainty. At length the coast is clear, and I am once more down in the thicket and among the gnarled trees by the old wall, quite by myself, and screened from observation by distance and the lie of the land. No prying eyes from any back windows in the neighborhood can overlook me. There is the place, in yonder corner, looking at first in the soft morning light much as it did by that of the moon. It is easily recognized, and in 2 minutes I had scrambled in among the bushes and discovered, by prodding with my stick, what may possibly be a trapdoor. But if it be, it certainly was not opened last night. The undergrowth, too, seems much thicker than it did then. Dense creepers, grass, ivy, mold, and dead leaves, in some cases several inches deep, smother it. And surely, unless carefully examined, no eye would have detected the existence of such a construction in the spot. Nevertheless, here is partial confirmation again. To clear away for closer inspection takes several minutes, but the end is that I get a hold of a heavy rusty ring, by which, with great exertion, I manage to raise the rotten plank of the lid of an old brick well. A peep into its dark depths, and a stone or two dropped down, tell me that there is water about 8 or 10 feet below. More confabulation with myself leads to my getting a ladder from the tool house, and lowering it to the bottom, with the intention of descending. When, at last, the ladder is firmly adjusted, down it I go, for I am used to ladders. It rests steadily at the bottom, and I can tell when I reach the water that it is not above 3 feet deep. Then I stoop and delve and poke about it with my stick, which presently touches what, by degrees, I make out to be, possibly, a box. Getting really excited now, and not afraid to wet my feet, I get lower and lower on the ladder until, half up to my middle in the icy water, I plunge my arm into the shoulder. After much groping, I seize upon some slimy links of a chain, by which I am able, by putting forth all my strength, to lift, and eventually haul up to the edge of the well, a sodden, worm-eaten, rusty, iron-clamped old chest, the very counterpart of that which I had seen last night, save for the effects which a long immersion would produce. Confirmation strong as proof of Holy Writ. Surely what I had witnessed had some foundation, but to say that I was amazed beyond all expression is to say very little. I shut up the well, hid it with bushes as far as possible, restored the ladder, and carried the box unseen to my room. What was in it? Its great weight and quaint exterior suggested treasure. Rotten as the woodwork had become, there was not much difficulty in prizing it open. It was chock full of golden coin, apparently Spanish doubloons, with dates varying from 1660 to the end of the century. When Tanner came home to dinner, I inquired of whom he had taken the place. He named the chief solicitor of the town. I went to him and asked for a little information regarding the history of the house. He was a dry old stick, with a complexion the color of his own parchments, but I corkscrewed enough out of him in time to get some clue to the foundation of my mysterious experience, though not enough to explain it. He was but the agent to the property. Its owner was a merchant in London, Gruber by name, and it was an ancestor of his, Michael of that ilk, who had built the house in 1690. He had made a fortune, so the tradition ran, said my informant, by no reputable means. In short, he was known to have been a lawless adventurer, one of the innumerable buccaneers who, during the greater part of the 17th century, waged piratical war upon the Spanish settlers in South America and the West Indies. It was said that he kept his treasure concealed in various parts of the house, which then stood quite alone on the outskirts of town. According to the lawyer, it was the tragic end of Michael Gruber which had given rise to the superstition about the place being haunted. It seems he was found at daybreak on the 29th of October, 1723, in a dying state in his garden, and lying near him was the dead body of a seafaring man, with whom he was known to have dealings. Evidently there had been a bloody encounter, and from what Gruber let fall in the delirium consequent upon his wounds, it is supposed that the man had been disturbed in the act of plundering him, and not being able to escape with the booty, was hiding it in the garden, with a view to future removal, when Gruber surprised him. Many facts went towards making good this supposition. Gruber, who was a very old man then, was only half dressed, as though he had risen hastily and rushed from his bedroom after the thief, and a secret panel which was discovered in the apartment when the dying man was carried back there appeared to give him great concern, for he continued pointing to it and declaring incoherently that his chest had been stolen. This seemed probable, as much of the valuable property was afterwards discovered in a secret cupboard. "And herein is the origin of the legend about the room being haunted, eh?" I asked, the mention of the missing chest and the date of the tragedy giving me the clue. "Yes, truly," answered my informant. "Nonsense of this sort is always attached to deeds of violence that have occurred years ago." "Pray, what is the exact nonsense in this case?" "Well, indeed, I am hardly capable of saying. I believe it is something to this effect, that anyone who sleeps in that room during the month of October will see someone attempt to enter it in the dead of night. But whether somebody ever gets in, nobody knows. You, sir, I believe, have been sleeping there lately, and of course have seen nothing, though, truly, I have been assured that certain tenants have been greatly disturbed." I evaded the point by saying, "Was a search made for the chest which old Gruber said had been stolen?" "I do not know. You see, it all happened a little before my time." The old chap chuckled. "You cannot recall further details?" "No, truly, not at this point, though possibly I might be able to hunt them up if you desire it, and will favor me with your reasons for making these inquiries." Then I favored him with my reasons by telling him what I had found, but avoiding all reference to the strange way in which I had been led to look for the well. I merely said that I had been poking about some ferns at the end of the neglected garden, and coming upon the trapdoor accidentally, had been induced to examine it, the result being the discovery of the old chest full of doubloons. The lawyer's parchment-like face as he listened to my account was as good as a farce. Evidently he thought me a lunatic. "Now, truly," he said, "this is very astonishing. We never knew of any such place. Very likely it had not been opened for years, and was completely hidden by the undergrowth. But if you will come with me, you shall see for yourself, and what I picked out of it. Here is my story. All that I have to add of importance is that on communicating with the then living Mr. Gruber, he behaved in the most handsome fashion. The treasure trove, which amounted in value to something over 1,000 pounds in gold, of course was his, but he insisted on my retaining half of it. No mean reward for my enterprise. One of the doubloons is here on my watch chain, as you see. The remainder, well, I, not being a rich man, converted most of them, having given 2 or 3 to Tanner and his wife. They held on to the end of their lease, some 2 years and a half, and I remained their lodger until the house was pulled down at the expiration of that time. Though I passed 2 more Octobers in that haunted room, no mysterious spirit ever tried to enter it again. I had laid the troubled ghost exactly 118 years to the day after it had been doomed to walk the earth, and to disturb periodically the peaceful occupants of the room which had been the scene of the crime. Until the present moment, I have never revealed to a soul the spiritual side of my experience. I could never make up my mind to let the laugh be turned against my skepticism on the question of spiritualism. Am I a skeptic now? Whether I am or not is of little consequence. My age is such that a few years more will, for me, clear up this as well as all the other great mysteries of the seen and the unseen, of life and death. Explain it further? Oh dear, no. I cannot attempt to do that. You must suppose what you please. I only know that if I had not seen what I saw, I should never have thought of looking for the confirmation of its truth at the bottom of a well, albeit that was the proper place. The end.